You know, there's something rather curious happening in our world today, and most people haven't quite noticed it yet. There are individuals among us who are quietly stepping back from the whole circus of modern society, not out of bitterness or defeat, but from something altogether different. These are people who've woken up, as it were, from a dream they didn't know they were having, and now they're finding it increasingly difficult to participate in the sleepwalking dance that passes for normal life. They're not running away to caves in the Himalayas or joining communes in the desert, though some do. Most of them are right here, moving among us, but they've developed what I can only describe as a kind of translucent presence. They're in the world, but not quite of it anymore. And this withdrawal isn't about rejection or superiority. It's simply that they've seen through the game and can no longer play it with the same earnest conviction that society demands. Now, before we go any further, let me be clear about what I mean by awakened souls, because this phrase has been terribly misused. I'm not talking about people who've had some grand mystical experience and now walk around with beatific smiles claiming to have all the answers. No, awakening isn't about acquiring some special spiritual status or joining an exclusive club of the enlightened. Let me put it to you this way. An awakened person is simply someone who's seen through the fundamental illusion that most of us spend our entire lives defending. The illusion that we are separate, isolated egos, struggling to survive in a hostile universe. They've discovered, not intellectually, but directly, that this feeling of being a separate self, locked inside a bag of skin, is a fiction. A very convincing hallucination that we've all agreed to believe in. You see, most people are living in what I call a chronic emergency. They're constantly preparing for life, getting ready to be happy, working towards some future moment when things will finally be okay. The whole structure of modern society is built on this anxious striving, this perpetual sense that we're not quite there yet, that we need to achieve more, acquire more, become more. But here's where it gets interesting. When someone wakes up from this trance, when they directly perceive that life only happens now, that the past is just present memory and the future is just present anticipation, something fundamental shifts. They stop living from that place of chronic emergency because they realize there's nowhere to get to, nothing to achieve that will make the now any more valid than it already is. Now, society doesn't know what to do with such people. Our entire economic system, our educational institutions, our entertainment industry, all of it depends on people believing that they're incomplete, that they need something more. So when someone stops buying into that story, when they're no longer motivated by the carrot of future happiness or the stick of future anxiety, they become rather useless from society's perspective. The awakened individual looks at the frantic pursuit of success, status, and security, and they see it for what it is. A desperate attempt to make the ego feel permanent, substantial, and safe. But they've seen that the ego is just a thought, a pattern of mental activity, and that we are not that. We are the awareness in which thoughts appear and disappear, including the thought called me. And this creates a profound disconnect with the mainstream worldview. Most people are identified with their thoughts, emotions, and the story of their personal history. They think that's who they are. So when you're talking to them, you're essentially talking to a collection of memories and conditioning, all defended by this fierce attachment to a mental construct they call myself. The awakened person sees through this, not just intellectually, but viscerally. They've recognized that thoughts arise spontaneously, that emotions come and go, like weather, that the whole inner narrative is just the mind talking to itself. And from this recognition comes a natural stepping back from the urgency that drives most human behavior. The urgency to prove oneself, to win, to be right, to accumulate, to achieve immortality through accomplishment. Let me give you a concrete example of how this plays out. Consider the typical workplace, the office environment, with its hierarchies and politics and competition. For most people, this is deadly serious business. Their identity is wrapped up in their job title, their salary, their position in the pecking order. They lie awake at night, worrying about presentations, conflicts with colleagues, whether they'll get that promotion. But someone who's awake sees the whole thing as a kind of elaborate game, like children playing house. They can participate, they can play along, but they're not fooled into thinking it's fundamentally real or important. They know that the roles people play at work are just that, roles, costumes, masks. And this knowing makes it very difficult to take the drama seriously. You see, they've discovered something that society desperately wants to keep hidden. The emperor has no clothes, and they can see it clearly. The status games, the accumulation of wealth and possessions, the constant comparison and competition. All of it is revealed as a kind of collective madness, a shared hallucination that we've elevated to the status of reality. And so they begin to withdraw. Not dramatically, but quietly, incrementally. They stop engaging with conversations that are just ego reinforcement, disguised as meaningful discussion. They lose interest in debates where people are simply defending their positions, rather than genuinely exploring truth. They find themselves unable to participate in the constant complaining, gossiping, and drama that lubricates most social interactions. This withdrawal is often misunderstood. People think the awakened person is being aloof or superior, that they've become detached or cold. But that's not it at all. If anything, they've become more genuinely present, more capable of real compassion, because they're no longer viewing everything through the filter of how does this affect me and my story. What they've withdrawn from is the unconscious reactivity, the automatic participation in collective patterns of fear and desire. They've stepped out of the stream of mass consciousness that's constantly seeking distraction, entertainment, validation from outside. And this makes them invisible to that stream. They're no longer adding their energy to the collective trance. Now, here's what's really happening beneath all of this. Society as we know it is structured around the premise that human beings are separate entities in competition for limited resources, and that through struggle and effort, we can secure our individual survival and happiness. This entire worldview is based on the sense of separation, on the feeling that I am in here and the world is out there, and there's a fundamental opposition between the two. But awakened awareness reveals that this is backwards. The person who's woken up has discovered that they are not the separate wave trying to survive. They are the ocean temporarily expressing itself as a wave. And this recognition doesn't come from thinking about it or believing it. It comes from direct perception, from actually experiencing the fact that the boundaries we think are so solid are actually quite porous. Let me put it more concretely. Right now, as you're listening to these words, air is flowing in and out of your lungs. You're breathing the same air that I breathed, that everyone who's ever lived has breathed. Where does the air end and you begin? When does it stop being outside and become inside? The boundary is arbitrary, a convenience of language rather than a real division. The same is true of food, of sunlight, of the entire web of relationships that makes your existence possible. You are not a separate thing that occasionally interacts with an environment. You are an activity of the whole universe, as integral to it as a wave is to the ocean. And when this is seen directly, not as an idea, but as a living reality, the entire motivation structure that drives ordinary life begins to dissolve. Why would you need to compete if you understand that there's no one to compete with? Why would you need to prove yourself superior if the very notion of a separate self has been seen through? Why would you strive anxiously for future security if you've realized that the only moment you ever have is now, and that this moment, whatever it contains, is already complete? The awakened person hasn't become passive or lazy, but their action comes from a different place. Instead of being driven by fear and desire, by the need to become something other than what is, they act spontaneously from the present moment, from attunement to what the situation requires. They work, they create, they participate, but without the desperate quality that characterizes most human activity. And society doesn't quite know what to make of this. We're set up to deal with people who want things, who can be motivated by rewards and punishments, by status and security. But someone who's fundamentally okay with what is, who doesn't need the situation to be different in order to be at peace, such a person can't be controlled by the usual mechanisms. So these individuals find themselves naturally gravitating away from the mainstream. not because they've decided to rebel or make a statement, but simply because the resonance isn't there anymore. They're operating at a different frequency, and the usual social exchanges feel hollow, like watching people take a movie seriously when you can see it's just actors on a set. They might cut back their work hours, choosing simplicity over the frantic pursuit of more. They might end relationships that are based on mutual ego reinforcement rather than genuine connection. They might stop participating in activities that once seemed important but now are revealed as just ways to fill the void. To distract from the present moment, this withdrawal is rarely absolute. You understand, they're not all becoming hermits, though some do. Most continue to have jobs, relationships, responsibilities. But there's a quality of known attachment to these things, a recognition that they're playing roles while knowing they're not those roles, participating in forms while seeing through the forms. And here's what's particularly interesting. As more and more people wake up and begin this quiet withdrawal, society starts to sense that something is wrong. The old motivations aren't working as well anymore. The carrots and sticks that used to drive behavior are losing their power. The fear of missing out, the promise of future happiness through consumption, the need for validation through likes and follows, all of it is beginning to feel hollow to more and more people. This is creating a kind of crisis, because our entire civilization is built on the assumption of separation and the anxiety it generates. The economy depends on people feeling incomplete and trying to fill that incompleteness through consumption. Politics depends on people identifying with their tribe and seeing other tribes as threats. Entertainment depends on people being bored with the present moment and needing distraction. But the awakened person is complete already. They don't need anything added to this moment to make it okay. They're not a good consumer because they've discovered that the thing they were looking for through consumption was never. In the things, it was already present as their own being. They're not easily manipulated by political fear-mongering because they've seen through the illusion of the separate, threatened self. Now, does this mean they don't care about the world? That they've become indifferent to suffering? Not at all. In fact, quite the opposite. When you realize that the boundaries between self and other are illusory, compassion becomes natural, not forced. You help others not out of moral duty or to feel good about yourself, but because you recognize there is no other, just different expressions of the same underlying reality. But this compassion doesn't have the urgency and anxiety that characterizes most helping behavior. They're not trying to fix the world or save humanity. They've realized that the world is not broken. It's perfectly itself, even in its apparent imperfection. Suffering exists, yes, and they'll naturally respond to alleviate it where they can, but without the underlying belief that things shouldn't be as they are. This is perhaps the hardest thing for society to understand. The awakened person has made peace with what is, including all the apparent problems and challenges. Not a passive acceptance that leads to apathy, but a deep yes to reality that paradoxically allows for more effective action. When you're not fighting against reality, when you're not insisting that things be different, you can see more clearly what's actually needed in any situation. So they withdraw from the collective madness of resistance, the constant no that humanity shouts at what is they. Withdraw from the war against the present moment that most people wage their entire lives. And in this withdrawal, there's a kind of letting go, a relaxation into what's actually happening rather than what should be happening. Let me tell you what this looks like in practice. You might meet someone like this and find them strangely unimpressed by the usual status markers. They don't care much about titles, credentials, wealth, or fame. Not because they've convinced themselves these things are bad, but because they've seen that they're irrelevant to what's actually important. To the simple miracle of consciousness, of being aware, of being alive right now. They might seem quieter than most people, less eager to fill silence with chatter. This isn't shyness or social anxiety. It's that they're comfortable with silence. They've discovered that silence is actually full, not empty. They don't need to constantly maintain their identity through talking, explaining, defending, because they're not identified with the mental construct that needs all that maintenance. You'll notice they don't get pulled into drama easily. When everyone around them is upset about something, they might seem oddly calm. Not because they don't care, but because they've seen that most drama is just the ego feeling threatened and thrashing about. They can be present with difficulty and pain without adding a second layer of suffering through resistance and complaint. Here's something else that happens. The awakened person often experiences what seems like synchronicity, meaningful coincidences, things falling into place effortlessly. But this isn't really magic or divine intervention. It's simply that when you stop fighting reality, when you're aligned with what is, you naturally move with the flow rather than against it, and life becomes much less effortful. They also tend to be less concerned with consistency. Most people are trapped by the need to maintain a coherent self-image, to be the same person they were yesterday, to defend their positions and beliefs even when they no longer serve. But someone who knows they're not really the story they tell about themselves is free to change, to contradict yesterday's opinion, to admit they were wrong without feeling their identity is threatened. This drives other people crazy, by the way. They want you to be predictable, to stay in the box they've put you in, because your constancy helps them maintain their own sense of stable identity. When you refuse to play that game, when you're fluid and present, rather than fixed and historical, it disturbs the collective agreement about how reality works. So the withdrawal deepens, not as a rejection, but as a natural consequence of seeing clearly. They spend less time explaining themselves because they've realized that most explanation is just ego defense. They engage less in social media because they've seen it's mostly people performing their identity for an imagined audience, and there's no one there to perform anymore. They might work less, not out of laziness, but because they've questioned the assumption that your worth is determined by productivity. They've recognized that you can't improve on existence by doing more, that the obsessive activity that drives modern life is largely just avoidance of the present moment. So they do what needs doing, what brings genuine satisfaction, but they're not driven by the whip of should. Now, let's be clear about something important. This withdrawal I'm describing isn't about superiority or judgment. The awakened person doesn't look down on those still caught in the dream, because they remember being there themselves, and they know it's not a moral failing to be asleep. We all wake up when we wake up. It can't be forced or scheduled. It happens in its own time. In fact, true awakening includes the recognition that there's no one to wake up, no separate entity that achieves enlightenment. The sense of being a someone who's now awakened is just another form of the ego, perhaps more subtle, but equally illusory. Real awakening is the falling away of the one who would be awakened. The recognition that there was never anyone there in the first place. Just awareness experiencing itself through this particular form. So the withdrawal isn't the awakened person removing themselves from society. It's society becoming transparent, seen through. They're still here, still participating, but the quality has changed fundamentally. They're no longer fooled by the play, even while continuing to play their part. And here's what's remarkable. As this happens to more and more people, as more individuals see through the collective trance, a new possibility begins to emerge. Not a new society built on the old foundation of separation and fear, but something genuinely different. A way of being together that's based on the recognition of fundamental unity. This won't happen through revolution or political movement, because those just replace one ego structure with another. It happens through this quiet withdrawal, through individuals ceasing to feed energy into the old patterns and naturally embodying a different way. And as the old structures lose the energy that sustained them, they begin to crumble. Not through force, but through simple lack of participation. What emerges in their place cannot be predicted or planned, because it will come from this deeper consciousness, rather than from the calculating mind that created the problems in the first place. But certain qualities can be sensed. A society built on cooperation rather than competition, on the recognition of interdependence rather than the illusion of independence, on presence rather than the frantic pursuit of a better future. The awakened souls who are withdrawing now are like advanced scouts, like cells in an organism that have mutated and are no longer responding to the old chemical signals. They can't go back to sleep, can't unsee what they've seen. so they simply have to find new ways of being while the old world churns around them. And the beautiful thing is, they don't need to do anything about it. The withdrawal itself is the teaching, the presence of people who are genuinely at peace, who have stopped seeking and found what was never lost. This is far more powerful than any words or doctrines. It's an invitation that requires no acceptance, a doorway that's always been open. You see, the crisis we're facing as a civilization isn't really a political or economic or environmental crisis, though it manifests in all these ways. It's a crisis of consciousness, a confrontation with the fundamental lie we've been living, the lie of separation. And this lie can't be fixed or reformed. It can only be seen through, and in that seeing, it dissolves. So the withdrawal of awakened souls isn't a problem to be solved. It's a symptom of humanity beginning to wake up. Like a fever that indicates the body is fighting an infection, this withdrawal shows that consciousness is no longer willing to sustain the old patterns. The discomfort is actually healing happening. And for those who are experiencing this withdrawal themselves, who feel increasingly unable to participate in the mainstream charade, let me say this: you're not going crazy, you're going sane. You're not becoming disconnected from reality. You're actually connecting with it for the first time directly, without the filter of thoughts and concepts that society insists is reality. The loneliness you might feel isn't because you're separating from others. It's the loneliness of the illusion of separation finally being recognized. And as you rest more deeply in the awareness that you actually are, that loneliness transforms into solitude, into the recognition that you're alone, in the sense of being all one. Not separate, not isolated, but intimately connected to everything that exists. Now, I want to be very clear about something. None of this means that you should force yourself to withdraw from society, or that you should judge yourself if you're still engaged in the usual pursuits. Awakening isn't something you do. It's something that happens, and it happens differently for everyone. Some people wake up and continue to participate fully in society, just from a different understanding, while others feel called to step back more completely. The key is authenticity, being true to what you actually perceive rather than what you think you should perceive. If the old motivations still have power for you, if you're still genuinely engaged with the pursuits that drive most people, then that's where you are, and there's nothing wrong with it. But if you find those motivations falling away, if the things that once seemed important now seem like shadows on a wall, don't force yourself to care about them just to fit in. The withdrawal I'm describing is natural, organic, not something achieved through effort or discipline. It's what happens when you simply stop pretending, stop performing, stop maintaining the fiction that you're a separate entity that needs to secure itself through achievement and acquisition. And in that stopping, that profound relaxation into what is, you discover what you've always been. Awareness itself, consciousness experiencing itself through this particular form. And here's the ultimate paradox. The very search for awakening can be the last and most subtle form of ego. The spiritual ego that's seeking to become enlightened, to join the special club of the awakened. But true awakening is the recognition that there's no one to become awakened. Nothing to achieve, nowhere to go, because you already are what you've been seeking. You've always been it. You couldn't be anything else. So the withdrawal of awakened souls from society is really the withdrawal of awareness from identification with the social ego. The awareness is still here, more present than ever, but it's no longer trapped in the costume, the role, the story of being a person trying to become something other than what they are. And as more people rest in this recognition, as more individuals stop trying to be something other than what they already are, the energy that sustained the old patterns of separation and conflict naturally dissipates. Not through fighting against these patterns, which only gives them more energy, but through simple non-participation. Through being so completely yourself that there's no energy left over for maintaining the illusion. What I'm pointing to isn't a new philosophy or belief system to adopt. It's an invitation to notice what's already the case, to recognize what you've always been underneath all the thoughts, emotions, and stories. You are not the character in your personal drama. You are the awareness in which the entire drama appears. And that awareness is the same awareness looking out of every pair of eyes. The single consciousness experiencing itself from countless unique perspectives. And when this is seen, really seen, not just understood intellectually, but perceived directly, the need to withdraw from society isn't even a choice. It's simply what happens, like water finding its level, like a leaf released from a tree falling to the ground. There's no one making it happen. It's just the natural movement of consciousness recognizing itself, and no longer willing to pretend to be limited and separate. So, if you're one of these people, if you feel yourself quietly stepping back from the mainstream, know that you're not alone in this. Though it may seem like it sometimes, there are others scattered throughout the world who've seen what you've seen, who can no longer play the game with full conviction, who are discovering what it means to be human without the burden of maintaining a separate self. And for those who haven't yet experienced this shift, who are still fully engaged in the conventional pursuits, these words might seem like nonsense, or might trigger curiosity, or might land somewhere in between. That's all fine, exactly as it should be, because there's no schedule for awakening, no right time or wrong time, just the eternal now, expressing itself through the particular dance of your life. The only thing I can really point to, the only invitation I can offer, is this. Notice what's noticing right now. Pay attention to the awareness in which all experience appears, including the experience of reading or hearing these words. That awareness, that consciousness, that's what you actually are. Not the thoughts about yourself, not the emotions that come and go, not the story of your past or your hopes for the future. Just this simple presence, this being aware. And in that noticing, in that direct contact with your own awareness, something shifts. Not dramatically, perhaps not with fireworks and revelations, but quietly, fundamentally. The grip of the personal story loosens just a bit. The urgency of becoming something other than what you are relaxes slightly. And in that relaxation there's a taste of freedom, of the peace that was always here, underneath all the seeking and striving. This is what the withdrawing souls have discovered. Not something new or exotic, but something so simple and obvious that it's easily overlooked. They've found what they are, which was never lost, and in that finding they've lost interest in the game of pretending to be something they're not. And so they step back, not in rejection but in recognition, not in fear but in love. Love for what is, for this miraculous play of consciousness expressing itself as the world. That's all this is, really. Not a problem or a crisis, not a rejection of humanity or civilization. Just awareness, recognizing itself, and naturally withdrawing energy from what isn't real to rest in what is. And in that withdrawal, in that coming home to what you've always been, there's a peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, a joy that doesn't require reasons, a love that includes everything because it excludes nothing. You are that awareness, that consciousness, that presence. Not the person you think you are, but the awareness in which the person appears. And that awareness is not separate from anything, it's the substance of everything. The ocean temporarily experiencing itself as a wave, the universe looking at itself through these particular eyes. And when you rest in that recognition, when you stop trying to be anything other than what you already are, society and its demands become transparent, seen through but not rejected. You're in the world but not of it, participating but not trapped, playing but not fooled. And in that freedom there's a withdrawal that's really a return, a coming home to what you've always been but temporarily forgot. This is the silent withdrawal of awakened souls, not a running away but a waking up, not a rejection of life but a deeper embrace of it. Freed from the illusion of separation that made it seem like a problem to be solved, rather than a mystery to be lived.